What's up guys, Josh Overby here, reporting for Jovaverse Video, and as promised I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of last night's Survivor Series 2014 presented by World Wrestling Entertainment. I'm going to keep things pretty brief, just give you a rundown of the show, give you my general opinion on how I believe it stacks up in the history of these WWF shows, or WWF, WWE. Essentially what we're looking at with Survivor Series is one of WWE's big four, right up there with WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Royal Rumble. As far as runtime goes, it's actually second only to WrestleMania, the first installment being in 1987. So it's definitely a storied pay-per-view, pretty rich history, a lot of great things in the history of the WWE have happened at Survivor Series. Some very memorable, some, I guess, more controversial, you could say, especially if you're thinking Survivor Series 97. But essentially, Survivor Series, in my opinion, has always seemed to fall a bit more into some quality conundrums than the other three have been susceptible to. So let's take a look at this one and see exactly how it stacks up. First of all, this pay-per-view was really sold on two matches alone. That was basically the sort of grudge match between Dean Ambrose and Bray Wyatt, and then the traditional Survivor Series elimination tag match between Team Cena and Team Authority. And I have to be honest with you, these are really the only two matches that delivered. Not to say that all the other matches were bad. There were some bad matches. For example, there was an impromptu match with Adam Rose and his grown bunny man friend, follower, disciple, whatever that thing is. And they went against the team of Slater Gator, being Titus O'Neil and Heath Slater. It was thrown together at the last minute, and when it was announced, it actually got audible boos from the audience, so it was kind of funny. They pretty much reflected exactly how I felt about the situation. This match had to have been all of 2 to 3 minutes long, and just seemed kind of pointless. Really, the bunny got in, did his missile drop kick from the middle rope, got a pinfall after Slater Gator got a little bit of their offense in, didn't tag in Adam Rose, but got the victory for himself, and that was pretty much it, sort of a pointless match. Another pretty pointless one actually was the Divas Championship match, unfortunately, between Nikki Bella and AJ Lee. AJ is a great in-ring performer. I always look forward to seeing her matches. And while Nikki is not the greatest in-ring performer that I've ever seen in the Divas division, I do think she's shown some improvement, especially over the last year or so. So I think that she and AJ they probably could have enough chemistry to put on at least a decent match. Unfortunately, we weren't given that opportunity. Instead, what they decided to do was recreate, and why I don't exactly know, Daniel Bryan's WrestleMania 28 loss to Sheamus, where he kissed AJ Lee on the ring apron when she was his valet at the time, turned around right into a brogue kick and lost the title in, I think it was 8 or 9 seconds. And they recreated that exactly. Basically, Brie Bella gets on the ring apron, throws a pretty mean lip lock on AJ Lee to everyone's surprise, who turns around into an elbow, and then ultimately Nikki Bella's finisher. I don't remember exactly what she calls it. I always call it the shock treatment because it's basically the same move that Abyss does in TNA. Hits her with that and wins the title. So the opportunity for a good match kind of went out the window, and Nikki Bella's our new Divas champion, which also leaves a little bit to be desired, but in any case. Other than that, we got a couple of decent matches. Those were really the only complete failures of matches, in my opinion. Aside from that, we got two matches, one being a traditional Survivor Series elimination match for the Divas, 4-on-4. And this involved the teams of Cameron, Paige, Layla, and Summer Rae against Natalya, Naomi, Alicia Fox, and Emma. Now, this match was hard to get invested in. There wasn't a lot of story going into it, and basically it just sort of turned into what the Divas matches typically are. There are some good athletes in there, but at the same time they tend to be a little bit sloppy sometimes in their execution. Naomi, for example, hit a really great looking, almost lucha libre style roll up into a stunner that looked really nice, but just seconds before she hit a cross body block where she actually hit her opponent with, I believe it was Cameron, with more of her knees than her abdomen, and the move just looked really sloppy. And that, unfortunately, that was really the tone of this match. It seemed like a lot of complicated, or fairly complex maneuvers that just weren't pulled off all that well. That seemed to plague the match a good bit. And given the lack of storyline, given the lack of, you could almost say, dynamics between some of the divas. It was a really tough match to get into, and especially being that it was an elimination style Survivor Series match, it just seemed to go on really long and never really become compelling or intriguing enough to capture our attention. So I wasn't really a big fan of that one, although it did have a couple of enjoyable moments. At the same time, though, we did get the four-way tag team match for the tag team titles, involving the teams of Los Matadores, the Usos, the reigning champions, Goldust and Stardust, and then the team of The Miz and Damien Sandow / Damien Mizdow. I'm typically not a fan usually of these types of tag team matches because they always become a bit too chaotic for me, and they don't really have a chance to really explore sort of the storytelling elements that are there. And that was certainly what this match turned into. There was a lot of basically the teams getting in all the offense you would expect. There were some comedic moments with Sandow, which of course were pretty funny. Then you had this massive spot fest with everybody diving over the top rope and landing on top of everybody else. Probably the most notable thing about this match was some of the innovative offense from the Dust Brothers. You had an interesting sort of double team that turned into a sunset flip, or it was a sunset flip that turned into a German suplex, which looked really nice. They also did a twist on the old Tower of Doom maneuver, the superplex from the top rope, where the partner on the bottom uses a power bomb. Same general dynamic, but it basically involved the Dust Brothers and the Matadors, and Goldust basically had them in sort of like a double back superplex position. Stardust gets into power bomb position and hit that sort of inverted Tower of Doom that looked really nice. But long story short, it turned into one of the Usos hitting the big splash, but getting thrown out by The Miz. Mizdow tags himself in and picks up the victory, and that leads us to Damien Sandow and The Miz being our new tag team champions. I'm kind of interested to see where that goes, being that Miz is very clearly hated by the WWE Universe, and Sandow is very much loved by the universe. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic moving forward. Now, as far as the actual quality of the two matches I mentioned that really sold the pay-per-view, Dean Ambrose versus Bray Wyatt did not disappoint. This is one of the reasons that you should check out Survivor Series 2014. You just knew going in it was going to be a very sadistic, psychologically driven match. And the pacing of this match really told that story well. Instead of the typical pacing where somebody works over their opponent for X amount of time and then the shoe goes on the other foot, this one, it seemed like no man could ever really get a really good head of steam, but it ended up being great. It was just back and forth the entire time. Bray seemed to have an answer for everything Dean Ambrose did and vice versa. A lot of sort of torturous offense. There, for example, was Bray Wyatt just laying Dean Ambrose's hand on the steps outside and stomping on the hand. Dean Ambrose escaping a full Nelson by grabbing Bray Wyatt's hand like this and splitting the fingers. You had a lot of real painful, simple but painful, torturous types of offense that you typically don't see in wrestling, but that makes a lot of sense for these two characters. You also had some great moments with Dean Ambrose sort of mocking Bray Wyatt's back bend in the corner. You had some really stiff clotheslines from a really stiff clothesline in particular from Bray Wyatt that just seemed to resonate throughout the entire arena. You heard the contact, almost seemed to shake your TV screen a little bit. It was a very noticeable thud when he hit. Long story short, they basically recreated the spot from WrestleMania 30 where Bray Wyatt gets a steel chair, and you might remember from WrestleMania where he handed it to John Cena and then offered himself as the sacrifice to see if John would let his inner monster out. Of course, John didn't, but he did the same spot with Dean, and Dean has no problem embracing that inner monster, so he lays out Bray with the chair, leading to a DQ finish, and then basically just burying Bray under a deluge of chairs and tables, and basically just gloating from the top of a ladder. The symbolism, of course, being that they're going to have another match at TLC next month, tables, ladders, and chairs, and that was confirmed, probably 3 minutes after the match. So generally, I'm not a huge fan of DQ finishes, but in this case, being that it's building toward an even more sadistic match at TLC, I'm fine with it. And yeah, I think there's still some more story to be told here. So I was fine with the DQ finish as a way to prolong it without really damaging anyone's character, in my opinion. And now the final or I should say, the main event with Team Cena versus Team Authority, this definitely didn't disappoint either. Everything that we were told going in as far as the importance of this match really played out in the pandemonium that ensued. Essentially, what we had here was Team Authority pulling out every stop they could. They suffered an elimination very early on when Mark Henry got knocked out by the Big Show, probably less than 10 seconds after the bell rang. But really, the two people to talk about in this match, the two sort of Iron Men, if you will, of the match, were Dolph Ziggler and Seth Rollins. Dolph Ziggler was definitely the MVP of his team. He spent a ton of time in the ring, being worked over by the Authority, but playing that sympathetic babyface role really well to try to get the tag. Seth Rollins ended up being, really that mastermind that they try to sell him as. He was almost like a sniper of Team Authority. Whenever pandemonium would break out, he would always be there to capitalize on it. For example, the eliminations of Ryback and Eric Rowan, you could both contribute to Seth Rollins. Pandemonium would break out, it would just turn into bedlam, and for example, Seth hits the curb stomp on Ryback out of nowhere, which leads to Rusev's thrust kick in the pin. Likewise, he hits the flying knee on Eric Rowan, which leads to Luke Harper's spinning clothesline, which led to Eric Rowan's elimination. What we end up coming down to, though, at the very end is that Big Show turns on Team Cena, ends up delivering a knockout punch to Cena, which leads to his elimination. Then Big Show hits the road. And then it's a 3-on-1 situation with Luke Harper, Kane, and Seth Rollins all against Dolph Ziggler. And Dolph Ziggler does great at overcoming the odds. Hits a zigzag out of nowhere on Kane for the pinfall. Hits a schoolboy roll-up out of nowhere on Luke Harper for the pinfall. Then just down to him and Seth Rollins again. And at this point, even though Sheamus was written out of the main event earlier this week, there's no shortage of shenanigans going on here, okay? Essentially what we have is the security wing of the Authority being Joey Mercury and Jamie Noble trying to interfere. You have Triple H pulling referees out of the ring. And basically when it looks like Dolph is about to win, Triple H pulls the ref out, knocks the ref out, then just proceeds to maul Dolph Ziggler as viciously as he can, hits him with a pedigree for the ages that looked fantastic, rolls Seth Rollins on top for the pinfall, calls out referee Scott Armstrong, but right before he can count, the lights dim, we hear music play that we're not exactly familiar with, but we hear the crowing or the cawing of a crow in the background, and just before we can make that mental connection, we see the Titantron screen with Sting's face flashing in the back. And yes, it happened. The man they call Sting actually showed up at Survivor Series last night in what was hands down one of the most memorable Survivor Series moments in my life, so especially me being an old school WCW fan, and I'd imagine it's the same for many of you wrestling fans out there. A great moment. He comes down to the ring, basically squares off with Triple H a little bit, they get in each other's face, talk a little trash, hits Triple H with a Scorpion Death Drop, rolls Dolph Ziggler on top of Seth for the pin. Ref comes back in, counts 1, 2, 3. The Authority is out of power. Team Cena wins by the hands of Sting and Dolph Ziggler. And man, just again, seeing Sting in a WWE ring for the first time, huge moment. The only issue I had with this match was that Seth Rollins seemed to be pretty cognizant of his surroundings when he was rolled on top of Ziggler several minutes before. But 5 minutes have passed and Sting's come to the ring and laid out Triple H and rolled Ziggler on top of him. So it seems weird that Seth would all of a sudden be unconscious and just willing to take a pinfall. If I could have chosen for it to be presented any differently, I just would have had Sting lay out Seth some way as well. Perhaps hit the Scorpion Death Drop on Triple H and then, unleash or reveal the classic black baseball bat from underneath his trench coat, lay out Seth that way, just so it makes more sense that he's unconscious instead of just because he seems to feel like it right now. But that one qualm aside, absolutely great. I loved this match, loved Dean Ambrose versus Bray Wyatt, and those are really the two reasons to check out this pay-per-view. Both of the endings of those matches left the story wide open. They can go in a lot of different ways, especially with the Sting Authority angle. Is this foreshadowing towards a Sting versus Triple H match at WrestleMania? Is it more of a smokescreen to distract us from what's really going on and what the real match is going to be, what the real struggle will be? Who knows? It can go in a lot of different ways. I'm excited to see it. I'm just excited to see Sting finally making his in-ring WWE debut That was a huge moment. So overall, Survivor Series, again, it was sold on these two matches alone, and those were the ones that delivered. The others just didn't really deliver. You had straight up bad matches, and then the next best match was just okay or pretty good. So on a scale of 1 to 10, which is always hard for me to do for wrestling pay-per-views personally, I would still have to give this maybe a 5 out of 10. It is not one of the best pay-per-views you'll see. In fact, I thought it was probably on the weaker end of the spectrum of pay-per-views this year. So probably right up there with Money in the Bank in my opinion, because Money in the Bank was lackluster in a lot of ways. And so aside from those two matches and Sting's reveal, those are really what boost the score up to 5. I would not go and watch this pay-per-view in its entirety again, but I would certainly rewatch those two matches. So as a closing thought on that, really, it seems a little bit surprising to me that this would be the pay-per-view they chose to give away for free on the network to try to encourage subscriptions. Just being that the wrestling to me seemed to be so lackluster, and with the exceptions of those two matches. Certainly them busting out Sting, having Vince McMahon at the beginning, adding an extra stipulation to the Authority match, that makes sense, and certainly, I certainly see their scheming there. But who knows? I mean, you have issues like Adam Rose and the Bunny Man, who, despite the ridiculousness of that gimmick, seems to be getting over for some reason. And so who knows? Maybe the general wrestling audience is more forgiving or more into that kind of thing than I am, and I'm just not giving them enough credit. It's very possible, but I can just say that from my perspective as a wrestling fan, as a longtime wrestling fan, if I had not yet been invested in the WWE Network and paying my $9.99 a month, this pay-per-view really wouldn't have convinced me to do it. Whether other people will feel the same, who knows? We'll have to wait for the quarterly numbers to come in and see what kind of good Survivor Series did. But that's it, guys. 5 out of 10. Not a great pay-per-view, but basically 2 great matches stuck in the middle of everything, and Sting is finally here in the WWE. That's about all I have to say about Survivor Series today, but of course, you can always feel free to follow me on Twitter at JoshuaOverby1. Stop by my blog at jovaverse.blogspot.com. All that's provided in the description. And until I see you next time, which who knows, maybe it'll be for something wrestling related, something different. Don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Just take care and keep watching wrestling. See you later, guys.